I think the church and society as a whole has not done a great job talking about gender specifically. What it means to be a man, what it means to be a woman. I think the church has really done, in my own ministry, I've done a poor job with this. Like we've pigeonholed men as this is what a man is and this is what a woman is. But I think when you look at scripture, being a man is not only, grunts, guns, and sporting events. And being a woman is not only flowers, baby dolls, and going to the bathroom together, or whatever y'all do, I don't know. Yes, there are some generalities, some similarities, some general characteristics of men and women, but we've kind of pigeonholed the genders so much so that there might be a young person who says, I don't like any of the stuff they're saying a man is. Maybe I'm not a man. Or a young girl, a young woman saying, I don't like any of the stuff they're saying a woman is, so maybe I'm not a woman. So we've not helped the conversation. So Brendan, why don't you walk us through some actual biblical characters and stories that maybe give us a different perspective on gender expression itself?
Yeah. So like Jeff said, like a lot of what we deem as masculine and feminine is not found in scripture. It has been molded, influenced, and dictated to us by culture, and we've simply adopted and accepted it in the church. So we have to understand, this is why it's important, that a lot of what people with gender identity questions struggle with are the rigid gender roles. Almost every person I talk to says, well, I just didn't fit into, there was no space for me in the church to express who I was as a woman, as a man, whatever that looks like. So we have just allowed culture to reinforce what is not true instead of letting scripture breathe hope into those that don't fit the norm. So the first one we're going to look at is specifically for the men in the room. All of us have heard this story at some point in our lives, I'm sure, but we'll look at King David. And specifically, 1 Samuel 17 is the story of David and Goliath, right? And when we think of men, like this is what we want to go to. Like David is going off to war. Yep. He is prepared to fight his battle against the giant. He's taking his slingshot. He only needs one stone because he's a man, and that's what it means to be a man. I got my one stone. He kills Goliath, runs over, cuts off his head, stakes it on top of his sword. Like everyone shouts out, like this is what it means to be a man, right?
And I don't want to interrupt. I do want to interrupt you, but I'm not trying to. That is every men's conference I've ever been to in my life. Yeah, freedom, right? It's all about war and violence, and we're going to take out the enemy and cut off his head, right? That's every men's conference I've ever been to in my life. And yet there's another side to David. That's not just a warrior. So go continue.
This is also why I've never been to a men's conference. Later in scripture, about halfway through the Bible, we find the poetic side of David, and that's in the Psalms. Over half the Psalms are attributed to David, and it is poetry. It is crying out. It's beautiful, and it's wisdom, and it's all of these things that are not just the grunts and groans of a warrior. It is a man that's in desperate need of his God. In 2 Samuel 6, we see David dance before the Lord with all his might. And I can only imagine what kind of dance he would have to be doing for like the author of scripture to be like, no, he wasn't just dancing. He was dancing before the Lord with all his might. And it was to bring honor and glory and worship to the Lord. This wasn't something to look down on him as a man. This was a way for him to express glory and honor to God. Yeah. In Exodus chapter 30.
So hold on. He was an emotional poet, artist, harpist who wrote music and happened to be a warrior. We forget that side of David, and any man who's like that, we wonder what's wrong with them. That's a problem, okay? So go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Exodus 31, we're going to read verses 1 through 3. It says this, that then the Lord said to Moses, look, I have specifically chosen Bezalel, son of Uri, grandson of Ur of the tribe of Judah. I have filled him with the Spirit of God, giving him great wisdom, ability, and expertise in all kinds of crafts.
Next men's conference, craft time.
Woo! If we continued on in that story, it would talk about how he was skilled in jewelry, in gold, in bronze, in working with silver. He was actually tasked by God. This was his calling in life, was to sew the clothes of the priests that would then they would wear. So he was a seamster, and this was his way of living out God's calling in his life. So there's some differences for the men in the room. Let's go to the females, though. Judges 4 talks about a woman named Deborah who was judge over Israel. And in Judges 4, we need to ask the question, when talking about femininity, was Deborah being feminine when she led Israel to war in order to free them from their oppressors? And later on in Judges 4 is the scariest book in the Bible, by the way. That's chapter right there. Is Jael embodying what it means to be a woman when she drives a tent peg through Sisera's head? Like, if you have not read Judges 4,
it's awesome.
Yeah, as a woman, like the empowerment that is seen in that chapter of Scripture. Proverbs 31, when we talk about what a men's conference is, a woman's conference typically talks about the Proverbs 31 woman. She goes through a bunch of different characteristics in describing what a godly woman looks like. And people often point to that as the wife that they want, as the woman they want to be, or whatever that looks like. But verses 15 through 16 in Proverbs 31 says this, that she gets up before dawn to prepare breakfast for her household and plan the day's work for her servant girls. And some of the men are like, yeah, that's the kind of woman I want. But verse 16 continues, she goes to inspect a field and buys it. With her earnings, she plants a vineyard. And so when is she displaying her femininity? Is it when she's waking up early to cook breakfast, to be in the kitchen? Or is it in her entrepreneurship?
Yeah.
Is it in making wise financial decisions? Is it for planning for the future and planting a vineyard? And so what Scripture does is it celebrates the difference in gender, right? It celebrates the difference between male and female while giving us a plethora of ways to express our gender. And we should be doing the same thing in the church.
Yep, it's good. That's a challenge to the church, I think, that we celebrate all different ways of being a man or being a woman. We kind of get out of the pigeonholes.